Hi, this is Kory Muniz, and I'm coming to you today from Saturday at the Conscious Life Expo at the LAX Hilton in Los Angeles, California. And I'm here today with Keith McHenry.
Yeah,
Keith, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kory, for having me. That's great.
Oh, you're so welcome. I stopped by your booth and was really impressed with what you and the people that are engaged with you are doing. So I'd love you to share your history and tell us what you do.
Okay. Yeah, so I was a college student of 22 studying painting at Boston University. And so one of the great things about, I looked for a job, like any college student needed, and I found you could work as a produce worker at a natural food store and be done by 9 o'clock, because when the store opened, all the produce had to be set out. So I took that job, and I found all this produce was not, it wasn't ever, most of it was sold, but there's always a lot of it that was left over. When I pulled off the bins, it would be too wilted, or it just wasn't like satisfactory. And I started taking that to the housing projects a couple of blocks away from the grocery store. It was called Bread and Circus at that time. Today it's called Whole Foods in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I took it to Portland Avenue to these projects. And one day I'm talking to the people that I gave the food to, and I said, "What's this new building over here behind MIT?" And they said, "Oh, that's where they're designing nuclear missiles." And it turned out they were designing the guidance system for an intercontinental nuclear missile to go over the Soviet Union and then divide into 4 different bombs and hit 4 different cities at the same time. And I was like horrified to find this out. And it was horrified to see that people needed free food on one side of the street. And on the other side, they were spending our tax dollars to develop nuclear weapons. And that's where the name Food Not Bombs came from. So then the other thing that happened at that same time, a friend of mine was arrested at Seabrook Nuclear Power Station, because we were going up there, and this was around the time of Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island. We were trying to keep them from building a nuclear power station north of Boston. And my friend got arrested on May 24th, 1980. His name was Brian Feigenbaum, and he was a law student at Boston University. And so we started doing bake sales to support him and to raise money for his legal defense. And I had a moving company, which essentially was an old van that I owned, and it was called Smooth Move, and I was moving this family, and they were throwing out a poster that said, "Wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed, and the Air Force had to hold a bake sale to buy a bomber?" And so I thought, wow, that's such a great idea. Why don't I get military uniforms at the Army-Navy surplus store, dress up like soldiers, and go out with our baked goods and this sign and tell people we're trying to buy a bomber. And this is a play on the fact that the parent-teachers, PTAs, Parent-Teacher Association, have to hold bake sales to raise money for their school supplies, yet we can have aircraft carriers and bombers and everything. We got have our national budget goes to that. And then the final thing that becomes Food Not Bombs is we decided that we would protest the Bank of Boston's investment policies in nuclear war and nuclear power, and that we would dress up as hobos, and we would take some of the food I was taking to the projects and make it into a big thing of soup, and that we would use this food, the soup, to make a soup line outside the stockholders meeting at the Federal Reserve Bank. And so we're making this huge amount of soup, and we start talking and go, wow, I wonder if we only have 8 or 10 of us there. It won't look like a soup line. We'll have all this extra food. It won't, that's a real drag. It's beautiful, organic, vegan stew. And so we decided what we'd do is to go to the Pine Street Inn, which was at that time one of the only shelters in Boston, and tell the homeless guys what we were planning. So I gave a little speech about why we're protesting the investment policies of the Bank of Boston, and when you come out, we'll have free food. And they're like, oh, this is great, a protest like the 60s. And on March 26, 1981, about maybe 50 to 75 of the people at the inn showed up. And business people came by, and they got in line, and we had like this kind of festival where we gave away this food. And people were like shocked, going, wow, we've seen this in movies, or the older people say, oh, I remember as a kid there were soup lines, but we haven't seen them in years. But so Ronald Reagan had just been elected, and his economic policies hadn't really started to take impact yet. And as it turns out, the guys from the street were like, you should do this every day. We don't have any food for us. We get the donut and coffee when they kick us out of the shelter, but then the rest of the day we have to fend for ourselves. And so we decided that evening we'd quit our jobs and do nothing but take food to housing projects and collect food from grocery stores like Erewhon and Bread and Circus and the food co-ops and Warburton's Bakery and all that. And then we take it we had like a schedule with projects and everything. And with Women's Battered Women's Shelter, Rosie's Place, and the Alcoholism Center, Osmond Alcoholism Center. And then we also would do street performances every afternoon, and we would provide dinner towards like around 5 o'clock, and we'd give out free vegan meals, and we'd have information on why we were vegan, how you could end world hunger if everyone started eating more plant-based diet, why we're for peace, why we're for solar, why we're for organics, and so on. And so we'd have all this type of skits with food at Harvard Square or sometimes the Boston Commons, and then we take food out to protests and so on, and that's how we got started.
That's beautiful. So how did the general public that you were assisting deal with having vegan food? Where I know most of them had never had it before. Were they skeptical? I know when you're hungry you tend to want to eat anything, but...
Very interesting. There were, you knew that because at the beginning they were eating, they just didn't care. They didn't mention it. The only thing that we ever had was African American people would like complain that maybe because we were mostly white, or we were really, other than maybe one person was from Latin America, that we were like being disrespectful because we weren't sharing meat. So we'd hear that a little bit at the beginning. But a really shocking story was that I went to this like a soup kitchen, or I'm supposed to bring food to like a church, and they weren't there, and I was going to wait for them to return, and it was winter, and it was really cold and snowing, and by this time we started getting buckets of tofu, but it would be frozen because it was, we'd leave it out back. In fact, that's how we invented this kind of way of intentionally freezing tofu and using it, because it kind of has more meat texture to it if you freeze it. Anyway, so these people start coming around my van, and they have these white buckets full of just uncooked tofu. And they're pointing at it. I remember this one woman, this African-American woman, just didn't say a word, and she just pointed and pointed. And I opened it up. And then she points more, and then I hand her like a cake of this tofu. And she just starts eating this like frozen cold tofu. It might not have been like completely brought to ice, but it was like really cold. And then before long, all these people are standing around my van, all in silence. I remember because the snow made it really super silent. And they're all eating cold, icy tofu. Just like, and their eyes were all bugging out, like they knew somehow this was so valuable to eat. And it was like, they weren't eating my bread, they weren't eating the vegetables I brought, they just wanted that tofu.
Oh, so they must have known in some way that there's a lot of protein there, and their bodies were craving it.
Yeah, they energetically, and tofu, like now people know what tofu is, but in 1981, people that were not Asian, it was, basically some hippies or people went to Chinatown might get tofu, but it wasn't like people knew about tofu in the mainstream community, and particularly not in homeless people living in like one of the roughest ghettos in Boston. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then eventually, over time, questions about it being vegan just stopped happening, and no one, no one ever. In fact, this is a new trend, maybe the last 10 years. Many homeless people are vegan. So they only eat at Food Not Bombs, or they eat the vegan options at other soup kitchens and they're grateful that Food Not Bombs exist because they had become vegan before they were homeless, and now they're homeless, and now they're vegan.
You give them a place to
and we give and you can see that it's really interesting in doing this for 37 years how there weren't homeless vegan people in 1981, in 1980. Now you actually have a substantial population of people that are vegan that are homeless who depend on Food Not Bombs to eat. So, terrible.
So how many cities are involved with your program?
We estimate it's around 1,000 cities in over 65 countries. And it's really hard to tell because there seems to be like a lot of movement where a group will stop and then I'll find out 3 more groups have started. So in the last week, I talked to a friend of mine who's from Turkey, and he says he's been reading news reports in Turkish about food not bombs in Ankara and Izmir and in Istanbul. And they've actually, because of the clampdown that's happening there, they're being arrested sometimes. And so then I just was doing a table at the farmers market in Santa Cruz, California, where I do an information table. And this couple comes by, and they go, "Oh, wow, we know you from Berlin. You're all over Berlin." So I asked them to get the Berlin people to contact us, because we have 3 principles, which makes it possible to be global, but also makes the networking aspect of it, the knowing which groups are where, a little less, obvious. So I don't always know where groups are. But we have a website, foodnotbombs.net, and it actually has this Google form that you can fill out, and it gives you the continent that you're on, and then the country you're in, and where like where your Facebook pages and stuff are, and then we can every week upload it to the Google Maps, and then people can find all this stuff.
So that's foodnotbombs.net.
Foodnotbombs.net. And so when I go, like, as an example, so they told me about the groups in Berlin. When I went to Indonesia, I'm touring, I found like 5 Facebook pages in Indonesian Food Not Bombs, and I connect with them, and I go to Jakarta, and I go to Medan, and I go to all the 5 cities, and I get to the last city. And the people are like, "How come you only went to 5 cities? We have 100 groups here." And they start like going by island, So they go in Sumatra, and they name off all the cities in Sumatra, and then in Java we have these groups, and so on. And they have these amazing photos that they brought to show me about their actions. So, for instance, one of the things happening in Indonesia, there's this thing called the Indonesian Master Plan, and it's a U.S. corporation that's provided this master plan, which they're going to the plan is to clear cut lots of forest and to mine all these things and so on. But part of the master plan was to eliminate the traditional markets. So the Food Not Bombs activists in Indonesia were actually making traditional food, because almost every area has its own traditional dishes. And a lot of them are vegan, so they would make this vegan dishes that were traditional, and they would put little notes in each dish, like you could see them, like little pieces of paper that explain the name and origin of that traditional dish, and they would be in the traditional markets. So what was happening was the government would bulldoze a market that might have been there hundreds and hundreds of years and build a shopping mall and bring in McDonald's and all that. So these young people were fighting against that. And in Burma, Myanmar, you could see video of Food Not Bombs feeding the military. So there's like 50 soldiers in these rows, maybe something like that, maybe 35 to 50 soldiers with helmets and camouflage uniforms, all in rows, and the Food Not Bombs activists are handing them the meals. In Manila, out north of Manila, there's Food Not Bombs started bringing food into a jail to give healthy vegan meals to prisoners. And they actually organized a Christmas punk concert for the soldiers, or the prisoners in this jail. So you have these I don't always know where the people are. On the website, we only have maybe 20 Indonesian groups, but they told me for sure there's over 100.
That's wonderful.
We have maybe 30 groups listed for Russia. Many people say there's maybe 200 groups in Russia. There's 5 or 6 groups in Ukraine that we have listed, and maybe more. And entire countries might have groups, and we have no idea.
In Los Angeles area, you have how many?
In Los Angeles, we have a bunch of LA groups. We have one that does Skid Row. We have one that does Pershing Square. We have some that do some of the other parks. We also have one on the 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica, and we have a Venice Beach group. Then you keep going south. We have like some in Orange County. We have a Long Beach, which is the third Food Not Bombs chapter, started in 1988. And then we have a couple in San Diego, and then you keep going south. You got Tijuana, Mexicali, and then just keep going south. You can go to Food Not Bombs all the way down to Lima, Peru, and down to Santiago de Chile, and just keep on going.
So if anybody wants to get involved, they just go to the foodnotbombs.org.
Net. Foodnotbombs.net. And then we have there are two main things about working with Food Not Bombs. You could start a Food Not Bombs. So if you go to the volunteer link, it gives you all the volunteer tasks that you could do with your local Food Not Bombs group, and then you go to the locations to find the group. But if you don't find a group, you can also hit the other link, which is 7 steps to starting a Food Not Bombs, and it gives the 3 principles. The food is always vegan, or the breads and pastries might be vegetarian, but the food we make is always vegan, and it's free to everyone without restriction, rich or poor, drunk or sober. We have no headquarters or presidents or anything like that. Each group's autonomous and makes decisions using what we call the consensus process, and we bring in the people that need the food to our meetings to help determine the direction of the local group. And we're not a charity, but that we're dedicated to taking nonviolent direct action to change society, so that, because we know that everyone could have a place to live. There's an abundance of food.
Let's say I'm thinking that I might want to start a chapter out here in LA, but I don't have the money to get the produce to buy to do this. What kind of suggestions might you have to help somebody deal with that issue?
Oh, well, this is a great thing. So, in everywhere, even in Africa, oddly enough, there is so much food being thrown away that it's sort of the same model that I started with, where I was the produce worker. But now you would go to the produce department, particularly good to go to natural food stores and so on, and or small independents. A lot Safeways and stuff don't tend to do this. They have another whole system for them. But you say, like, I'm going to feed the homeless on every Saturday. Can you donate on Friday the produce that you can't sell, or Saturday morning? And then they'll put it aside in a box, and then you come by and pick it up. Bagel places and bakeries, local tofu. There's like great tofu manufacturing companies actually in Southern California and LA, and they'll put the tofu aside for you, and you just set up an arrangement. That you don't really need to dumpster dive. Food workers want to give you the food that they can't sell. It makes them feel so much better. It also makes their business better because, 1, they don't have to pay for food to be discarded, and 2, they don't have to have really low quality food on their stands, because it gives them the option to feel good about throwing something that might be questionable away, that they feel guilty about throwing away, but knowing that it's actually going to become food for somebody living on the streets, or at a protest, or at a festival, or whatever, because we share food we did Katrina, Sandy, 9/11, we fed the rescue workers, we did cyclones and tsunamis in Asia, we fed survivors of the Northridge earthquake and the Loma Prieta earthquake in San Francisco. So there's like all these things that the food goes to.
You were telling me that you were at Standing Rock.
And we've been at Standing Rock since November, feeding that action. We also provided vegan meals at Occupy Wall Street, and about 300 occupations, including the one in Moscow and the one in Budapest. But I was involved in helping set up kitchens in several cities, including Washington, D.C. I helped set up 2 kitchens. We have, right now we're sharing food at the immigrant rights protest. We shared food at the first Women's March that happened right after the inauguration.
I was there.
Yeah, so we're like getting busier and busier with providing free meals at these actions. We've supported strikes, so when workers have gone out on strike, we will provide free groceries to the families so they can stay out longer. And we have, for example, the world's largest vegan Thanksgiving is at Hempstead train station on Long Island every year, usually the Saturday before Thanksgiving. So there's all these things, we were doing free concerts where we give out free food. We've had things called Soup Stock, the next big Soup Stock that I'm trying to work on is for the 40th anniversary, which would be May 24th, 2020. And I'm hoping that it's a giant concerts like all over the world where we give out vegan meals to everybody that comes, free music, everybody can bring their artwork to sell and all of that. And so that's kind of what I already have a Facebook events page for Soupstock 2020 that you can find, and we've had out of these soup stocks all kinds of other ideas germinate from them, where people come there with an idea to promote. So the biggest one we had was about 18,000 people on our 20th anniversary in San Francisco, and the band Fugazi was like the kind of the draw. And so we're planning that kind of thing. So we're not only about protesting or feeding the homeless or providing food for survivors of natural disasters or terrorist attacks, but we're also about celebrating the future that we know we can happen. And my partner, Abby Samuel, she frequently points out to people that my paintings, which I do Food Not Bombs paintings, are all paintings about the future that we know can happen if we work in a concert together.
Right.
And I always include in them paintings of, we used to do pirate radio a lot back before that, when the web was first being developed. We started a thing called indie media on the web, which is now essentially Facebook is what it morphed into. We have Bikes Not Bombs, where we get bike parts, we teach people how to put bikes together, we give away free bicycles. We do Food Not Lawns Gardens, where we'll take over abandoned lots and bring the community together and cultivate the soil. And we have a place called the Food Not Bombs Free School in Taos, New Mexico, where people can come in the summer for several weeks and learn all kinds of things about permaculture, adobe brick making, those kinds of things. So we're like about not only saying no to the bombs, which could be genetically engineered foods or industrial meat production or any of the other things that are like bombs, but we're for food, a future where everyone can live in harmony and peace and have the food, shelter, education, healthcare, the things that they really, there's an abundance of. And if there wasn't an intentional hoarding or holding back on those resources by people who feel they would gain power or profit by doing so, that we could have, there's no reason there should be nearly 1 billion people on Earth going hungry. It's not about that we can't.
I agree with you.
You go to Africa, and I've been to Africa many times, they grow all this food in Africa. The reason people are going hungry in Africa is not because it's not a fertile, beautiful land with beautiful rivers and so on. It's because that food gets shipped to other countries. And the people sit there and watch their food go off to Europe, go off to China, go off to Saudi Arabia.
And I think that happens all over. And I'm glad that you brought up the future, because right now we are trying to bring people into the next paradigm shift, and with our organization Time Is Now. And I know that you went to our website. How do you feel? We'd love to have you on board with us and co-work with each other. How do you feel that what you're doing works with what our mission is?
Well, it works totally with it, because you have all these components, like a spiritual component, of a political components for love, nonviolence. It's in total harmony with what Food Not Bombs is doing. And so all along we have tried to unite with all other kind of like-minded people. And there might be a diversity of ideas, but the general idea is that we're for making the world a better place, that for caring for one another, and all those things are reflected by what you're doing on trying to unite a coalition of people to really transform the future. And that we talk a lot about transformation as opposed to tearing down the government and replacing it with another government, as we've seen in past revolutions, for example. This is more of a revolution of the consciousness and a revolution of the ideas, where why we were not supporting these things like nuclear arms race and so on, we're building a consciousness where we're replacing it with love and compassion and those kind, and a sense of abundance. And so I think the time is now is in alignment with the goals and the ideas of Food Not Bombs.
Well,
they fit totally together.
I know that we're really happy to have come across you and feel very blessed that you've given us this interview. And so, Keith McHenry from Food Not Bombs. Please check out his website, check out foodisnow.org and foodnotbombs.net.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Keith.
you.
And let's no handshake, do the love.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're beautiful.
You are too.
Thank
Thanks.
you.